Brent Sutter, the hockey coach, used to say, you got to get afraid early. And a lot of people would question that. What are you talking about, get afraid early? Well, you got to get afraid early so you do all the things you need to do so that what you're imagining will not happen. And if we take that metaphor to an organization, and let's say you're trying to do some cost cutting down the road, and you get in touch now with what it would feel like 3 years from now if you do not do the cost cutting. And suddenly you're no better than any other airline, you're in a much worse place, etc. And you get in touch with that, so you find the energy to do it now. You see, because unfortunately, most people do not change based on information. It almost always takes a giant wake-up call. Be the exception. Change based on the information by creating the imaginary scenario that you do not take care of things, and that creates the energy so that you do take care of things. I think as leaders, we owe it to our people to prepare them for what's down the road. Leaders can see much farther into the future because they've been thinking about it for a long period of time than the rest of us can. And so we're much further backward in the transition curve than the leaders are. And if you're going to help people through very difficult times, you have to put them in situations where you test this. And thus the imagining of crisis and all of that sort of thing. Yes, it sounds negative and critical, but the truth is people need it in order to be prepared for what they're going to have to go through. In the space industry, they don't just send someone to the moon or send them up in space. They put them through very difficult simulated challenges so they acquire the skills they need to be able to deal with that, you see? And this is where pressure comes in. We do this all the time in these arenas, in sport. I've spent a lot of time here working with women's hockey, and one of the things we work on is how do you turn pressure into development? And not in a mean-spirited way, but because we know they're eventually going to need it, just as all of us are going to need it. The game is not going to get any easier in the next 3 years. No one's going to have bigger budgets with less to do and more resources. It's just not going to happen. And so again, it's not being mean-spirited. It's preparing people for what they need in order to be able to perform further down the road. I would be insulting you as an employee if I did not prepare you for that, and if I didn't act as if you can handle this. And so a little adversity, a little anxiety, that's fine. I don't want you to break your leg, but if you skin your knee, that's okay, because we need to learn what we need to do in order to continue to be successful. I was recently at a presentation, and a gentleman put up overheads, and they were the logos of 8 to 10 Canadian companies like Eaton's that were no longer in business. And the reason was because while they were successful, they didn't do the things that kept them successful. They waited until things had gone too far, they'd lost their edge, they'd lost their advantage. The really smart companies stay ahead of that curve. And they do that by creating situations that challenge people each and every day to get a little better, including the leaders themselves. In this very arena, prior to the Sochi Olympics, I was busy working with the women's hockey team, preparing them for Sochi. And one of the things we worked on was, what do you do if you're down 2-0 at the end of the second period? How do you deal with that sort of thing? And we got into a conversation just around score in general. And I tried to point out to them that the score is not real. The score is never real to the end of a game. You see? And so whether you're ahead or behind or you think you got a lead, you get into protecting in hockey on these ice surfaces, teams get into protecting leads. They're protecting something that doesn't even exist. It only exists at the end of a game. And so why would we get all engaged in protecting something that's not even real? You got to continue to do what you've done to get the lead. You got to continue to accelerate. You got to continue to move forward. You do not get complacent when you have a lead, or that lead starts to diminish. That lead starts to shrink. Well, at one point, we had a tremendous advantage over our competitors. It's not so tremendous anymore. And if we get in touch with the shrinking of that, that creates a lot of anxiety that's not good. So we really got to get in touch with what do we need to do to maintain the lead or lengthen the lead. And those are the kinds of things we got to get engaged with. Because saying we have a lead today, that's not going to be real 2 or 3 years down the road. So there's no point in getting caught up on that. And certainly, there's no point ever in getting complacent, because none of the complacent companies will be around 3 or 4 years from now. We need to do the things that we do not think are necessary today so that they are not necessary tomorrow.